All right now. So it's Monday motivation. And this is the I Bring It Every Day channel. So I like to start the week off on a positive note. And usually, what I like to do is I do a lot of my planning on a weekly basis. But you can do it however you wish. But you know, like I said, it's sort of like whatever moves you. So like I said, what you want to do is you want to just make sure that you have hold on, let me see. Hold on. Losing my thing. Okay, there we go. You want to make sure that you make a few plans for the week. And like I said, when I say make a few, I just mean one or two or three. You don't want to make a whole lot of plans, but things that are actionable and that you're able to accomplish. And then you just want to try to take the steps to making those plans come to fruition and then go from there. So anyway, I like to start the week off with positive affirmations. And the one thing that I heard a few people talk about the other day, and I kind of listened to a lot of positivity from, I'm not going to say famous people, but people who, obviously you have to look at people who have had some success in their lives, and usually they they have a lot of quotations that are affirmed that they've said. So, and the one thing that I've noticed, just basically speaking with a lot of people who are fairly successful, is that they definitely have this strong belief in themselves. That's like the first thing. So, let me start there. But so you have to have a belief in what you want. If I can spell I before E. Believe in yourself. Yourself. Okay. Squeeze that in there. So you got to believe in yourself and what you want to do. And the first thing is, the second, actually, even before that is, and I heard this song the other day, and I really thought about it too. Is uh, it's what's his name? It's oh my goodness, I can't think of the man's name now, but it'll come to me. But he said, "You can't get what you want till you know what you want." That's the basic thing of the song. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I wish somebody had told me that years and years ago." Because it's funny. You think you know what you want, but sometimes you don't. You know what I mean? You might want multiple things. So let me see if I can find that guy's song. Oh my gosh, it's going to drive me crazy. His name is Joe something. Joe. Let's see. This is going to drive me crazy. But I love this because I didn't even think about this. Yeah, here it is. Can't get what you want. Okay, here we go. His name is, you can look up this song. Uh, Joe Jackson. Is it Joe Jackson? It is Joe Jackson. Okay, his name is Joe Jackson. And his song is You Can't Get What You Want Until You Know What You Want. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, yeah, that's what it says. Joe Jackson Vivo. Yep. Okay, and that was from the 80s, sometime in there. But anyway, so you have to know what you want. You have to know, or you must know. Let's say you must know what you want first. And that's really number one, actually. Let me go back. I'm going to erase that. You must know what you want. You know, there we go. That's it. So, and so, in other words, you can't get what you want until you know what you want. Exactly. And then you have to believe in yourself. And then you have to, then you have to make your plans. You make your plans. Then you have to, outline the steps, you know. Then you have to do the work. And then periodically you have to reevaluate. And I'm sorry I could not get that. And then adjust. You know what I mean? And you have to make adjustments if you need to. Okay. So anyway, that's the basic steps of kind of going through life and trying to get to things that you want to do. And so that's really where I was thinking. So anyway, so you could actually flip number one and number two. But this song, the guy's name was Joe Jackson, and he said, "You must know what you want to. You can't get what you want until you know what you want." And I said, "That is actually really clever." But anyway, it's a great song, so look it up. It's on YouTube, and there's a couple of good live versions of it. It's kind of amazing. All right, now. So anyway, that's the deal. So let me see here. I want to see if anybody's in the chat. We got Miss. Oh, okay, Suzanne's here. Thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it. Okay. So and thank you to the lurkers who are out there. So anyway, make a comment after the fact if you don't mind, and let me know what you think. But like I said, this song was really the one that really smacked me in the head this weekend. I was listening to random music, and I usually just turn on YouTube. I just kind of let it run, and I have a couple of playlists. They're pretty decent on YouTube, at least I think. And one of them is musical groups I enjoy, and another one is I have some of my favorites, but there's other crap in there that may not be, for what turns you on. But I do have some good music in there. So anyway, but this is what got me really thinking about trying to get back to doing new things. So right now it's springtime, and you know I've really been sort of neglecting my focus. So a while back, I was really, really focused on food. And long story short, for the people that don't know, I do a little cooking usually on Fridays, and I haven't done as much lately because I'm still kind of revamping my recipe file. But the biggest thing, that the whole thing that I discovered just by sort of a little bit of happenstance and a little bit by just the way things kind of turned out, is that my husband and I, because we had two kids pretty close together, and you're running around, you're trying to get everybody fed, and so we did a lot of things with fast food. We didn't eat a lot of fast food, but we would always take them to the big place, and because the kids like the playground basically, and I thought that was cool. And sometimes we would take them to the chicken place that had the playground, and a lot of the school activities, they would always do fundraising, at these fast food joints. So we would always end up in these places because of the school activities. And the thing was, when my husband and I first got married, we were going around like there was. I'm just going to say there was a McDonald's promotion, and they were giving out this toy, and we were looking for these particular toy line, right? And we went to all these McDonald's, and we were buying, we were buying the toys, and also sometimes I would get the Happy Meal. So anyway, the thing that was funny was I would get the Happy Meal because it was small, and I never really was a big eater anyway. So I would always get a small hamburger, small fry, small drink. That was like I kind of lived on that all my life. And my husband always liked the big, hamburger and stuff like that. But anyway, the crazy thing was he gained like, I don't know if it was 10 pounds or 15 pounds in a really short period of time. And I remember saying, that's it. Like, we're no longer eating any of this stuff. But anyway, so the bottom line is I was really focused on food because I realized that eating outside of the home was not, in my husband's best interest. I was fortunate. Like, I don't gain or lose weight. I'm kind of the same. And I've been the same for a very long time. So I'm not a gainer loser, but my husband's that way. And anyway, I started sort of studying food and finding out like what's in the food, and just seeing that, like I said, he gained, about 10 pounds in a really short period of time. I want to say a month or so, you know what I mean? So anyway, I'm trying to get back to a little bit more about the food. And so if you look on social media, there are a lot of people that are talking about food. But anyway, because it's springtime, just here's the long way of getting around that story is it's time to start planning, because the more that you can grow yourself, the better it's going to be for you. All right. So that's my long-winded story and how I got to where I'm at. Okay. So anyway, good morning, Miss Shatika Woods. Thank you so much for the support. But anyway, I just wanted to come in today and just talk just about a couple little things, just to kind of keep you going. And so let's go. I have my little affirmations thing here. I'm just gonna find the one thing. But I like this. Like I said, this is the biggest thing for me this weekend. I said, you can't get what you want until you know what you want. And then you just have to define those steps. But these are the I bring it everyday steps on how to get more of what you want. All right. But yeah, but the main, and then the other thing is you got to do the work, and a lot of people don't do the work. But anyway, all right, so let's keep going. I'm going to erase this. All right. But welcome in. Welcome in. Okay. I'm going to just erase this whole thing. So I'm just going to put a couple affirmations and then we're going to start our day. And anyway, if you guys want to share anything that you're working on, let me know. And what are you going to do this week to move yourself forward? I guess that's the question. So I'm going to put the question here. So what are you going to do to do this week? Forward. Okay. And that's the thing I want you to think about it in the back of your mind. All right. Okay. So here's the first one. So you are enough. Okay. That's the first thing. You are enough. You got to believe in yourself. Do what brings you joy. And they say if you do that, you're never going to work a day in your life. And I think I believe that. I never, like I said, that's one of those ones I never thought about it too much. But we're gonna say, stay as positive as possible. Positive. Because as think stuff happens, as they say. Stuff happens. So you have to, like I said, I think the biggest thing is when negative things happen or when bad things happen. I think you're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to grieve. And I say you're allowed to grieve. I don't know. I'm going to give you just a random time, but I think you're allowed to grieve for about 2 to 3 hours. You know what I mean? You can grieve. I mean, other than like major catastrophes in life. I'm just talking about little catastrophes like you get a speeding ticket, things like that. I mean, but like big things, you're grieving. The grieving process is much longer. But I'm just saying, um, you're allowed to grieve for a couple of hours, but you sort of have to move away from what's negative and try to steer yourself to be as positive as possible. And that's kind of what I'm saying there. Yeah. So I mean, so like I said, it's okay, you're allowed to grieve. I mean, and the thing is, people always go, oh, you can't complain, blah blah blah. Like, you have to get it out, I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing with a lot of people, because I think a lot of people don't see, you have to feel your emotions. And I always say that to the people, to the people in my family. I always go, listen, even though you don't like the way they're reacting to something, they are definitely they have to feel those emotions and get past it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you're not, hurting other people. You know what I'm saying? But you just have to get that off you have to work through it, and that's okay. And however long it takes you, is however long it takes you. All right. So that's the deal there. So you got to be as positive as possible. And hello, Miss Sonia's Creations. Thank you for coming in. Yeah. And yeah, so definitely. And then also remember, part of this is taking care of yourself. See how that's, make sure I'm in the shot there. Yep. Take care of yourself. And this means, eating well. Back to that whole food thing that I tried to, I know I went down a little bit of a road, but the part of this, and I'll tell you, so I'll share this with you today. Um, so I have some relatives that are going that have some health issues, and I've been trying to get them to eat better, throughout the time, of just probably for the last 10 years. And the biggest thing is, I was always trying to get them to limit. I'm not saying remove the sugar, but limiting the sugar. And it was tough. Because we're all coffee drinkers, and it's like sometimes people can't drink the coffee without the sweetener, and I get that. But I kind of begged them. I said, please, you gotta limit some of the sugar, because they were pretty sugar heavy people. And I remember kind of going like, you gotta cut it out. You gotta cut it out. Well, it's taken probably, I don't know how many years. It's taken several years, but they reported in yesterday to me, and they said, guess what? We're not using sugar in the coffee anymore. And I went, oh, because they would put like 4 or 5 teaspoons of sugar in a cup of coffee, and not a big one. And it was kind of shocking. And the thing that I've learned, and like I said, always do your research yourself. But I would highly recommend, anybody who's having any kind of health issues, whatever kind it is, to really try to get those carbs, the sugar, down, because I will tell you that now that interestingly, both of them looked about 30% better than I saw them like a month or so ago. And I went, wow. So I have to like congratulate the people that are feeding them. And they finally got them, off the sugar and the coffee. So I think that's a big deal. And it's just little steps, you know what I'm saying? But like their skin looked better, they looked a little bit thinner. I think their one or two of their health issues was kind of minimized, even though I'm not a doctor, but I'll tell you, it really seemed to help. It's just a little thing, you know. But you know, anyway, yeah, it's crazy. So I'm just saying you got to take care of yourself. And I think a lot of people feel like, it's kind of like a preachy thing to do, tell people what to eat and blah blah blah. But I will tell you, like, I never thought that I would be so passionate about food. And food in this country has been very hairy. It's been very difficult to figure out, safer things to eat. So by extraction, I'm saying if you grow as much as you can, at least it's not been treated with, pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and things like that. And I really think a lot of that too has an effect on the body. Although like no one's really ever studied that. But I would, I wish somebody would, with all these preservatives, because a lot of the processed food is kind of brutal. So that being said, like I said, when I saw that they said they've been doing it for a month or so, and it is clear that they were looking a lot better. They were walking better. I mean, it was crazy. And I just, I'm not a doctor, but I will tell you, as sure as I'm here, they are looking better. So, hence, you have to take care of yourself. So don't be afraid to make some small adjustments in your diet. And I'm not saying you have to, eat plants or whatever, turn into a rabbit. But I will tell you, if you make better food choices, it seems to have a positive effect. And this is just a month in, a month or so in. So, something to think about. All right. So let's see. Suzanne. Oh, Suzanne's saying hi to everybody. Yep. So anyway, so I'd like to say thank you for coming in. This is pretty short. I just wanted to, give you a few things to think about. And I don't know if you guys want to share before we go. If you don't mind, in the chat, Any positive news. So for me, that seeing my couple of relatives, you know, minimize their sugar, and like I said, that physically they looked a lot better. Like it's amazing. It was the skin, and their walking, and even their mind seemed a little sharper. I will tell you, it's very interesting. So I'm like, ooh, okay. So like I said, I've been able to. For me, the biggest thing is I still like baked goods. So for me, I have to figure out ways to minimize. I'm gonna have to try like lower sugar options for some things. And I don't eat them often, but I do every now and again. I like a good, you know, croissant, a good piece of cake or something like that. But anyway, yeah. So and that's the other thing. And then the other thing I think that's really easy for me, I think for a lot of people, if is limiting, like the carbonated stuff, the carbonated beverages. I don't know if you want to call them soda, carbonated beverages, or like for a lot of people, that really helps them minimize the sugar. It's real easy, you know. And I'll tell you one last story, and I think I've some of the people in the room have heard this before. But so anyway, I had a friend of mine who was very, very short. She was 4 foot something. Like she wasn't even 5 feet tall. She was tiny. And when I met her, I don't know what was going on in her house, but she started drinking, soda or pop, like like an insane amount of it. And she drank so much that it rotted her teeth. And it was over, I would say, a year. Like I had never met her before, and I met her kind of, late in life or whatever. And we had a few classes together. And over time her teeth started to rot. And then she put on, ooh, like I don't even know how many pounds. Like she just got very round. Because when you're short, you can't you can't eat a lot. Like it's weird. You know what I mean? Like when you're 4 foot something like that. Well, anyway, she she like over the course. So anyway, she had sort of the gut and butt kind of situation where she had a big round stomach and a big round behind, and she was just as round as she was tall. And so, and I said to her, I said, "Hey, like, what are you eating these days?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm kind of hooked on one of the colas. I'm just gonna say one of the colas." And I said, "Well, like, how much are you drinking?" And she said, um, "A 2 liter a day." And I went, "Oh my gosh, 2 liters a day." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy." And I said, "Well, you've got to stop because your teeth." And she goes, "Yeah, I got to go in. They're gonna have to." She had to like put caps on almost all of her teeth. Especially the front ones. They were gone. Like they were just starting to rot. It was crazy. And so anyway, long story short, a year later, or maybe 6 months later, she stopped drinking the 2 liters a day of this cola, and she lost how many pounds? She lost 30 pounds. And this was pre GLI, semi-glutide and these other things. This was back, years and years ago. And she lost like 30 pounds really fast. And I ran into her maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I didn't even recognize her. She was so skinny. She was thin. She was fit, like straight up and down. So no more gut and butt, kind of a thing. And her teeth were done, and she, this is years later. She had kids and family, married, and all this stuff. But that just goes to show you just how quickly you could lose some weight if you really minimize the sugar. And like I said, she was a soda drinker, and she was hooked. She really enjoyed it. But anyway, it was just very, very interesting. And like I said, she was only 4 foot 6 or 4 foot 8, very, very small. But yeah, let's see. So anyway, I'm gonna go back to the chat. So I'm just saying, this kind of goes under taking care of yourself. You could just make better choices. And that's just easy. And that was so easy. 30 pounds gone. Yeah. All right, let's go back to the chat. So we have Miss Renee's here. Yes, Suzanne said, um, oh yes, drink lots of water for sure. Oh no, you're not late, Miss Renee. You're good. And everybody's saying hello. And yes, and Suzanne said diabetes makes one thirsty and drinking soda creates more issues. Yeah, that's crazy. And oh, there's Associate Minister, Reserve Deacon, Mr. Terry. Hey, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, like I said, I really, if I hadn't seen this with my own eyes, like this is unscientific, but I will tell you just a little bit of those are just two examples of just kind of minimizing the sugar and seeing the positive effects. You know, and the other thing was she had acne pretty bad. I remember the girl when she was drinking that soda. So she had acne, she had acne, gained about 30, 40 pounds. You know, um, her teeth, it was wrecking her teeth. And I said, "Wow." Cuz I understand, like it's funny, like I grew up drinking, soda, and I understand the appeal of it because I used to really enjoy, but I never drank huge amounts. I would always drink maybe 6 ounces or less, you know what I mean? Something like that. But yeah, but that's, that was a girl I went to school with, And when I see, like I said, and I saw, some family members that have cut their sugar down, I mean, and they're doing much, much better in a very short period of time. So it is interesting. Yes. And sugar is addictive. That's what Suzanne's saying. That's for sure. And I think that's the thing. It is super addictive. And it's hard to get rid of. And I think they said it really it does a lot to your brain, more than what we know, it's very interesting, right? Oh, okay. Everybody's talking about having a person's Ecclesiastes moment in your life. Yes. Isn't that interesting? Yes. Oh, okay. So Renee, okay, Diet Coke. So Renee likes Diet Coke. So, those, okay. And I can resist anything but temptation. I love Diet Coke. So here's the deal. Um, there is, I think they use aspartame in there, I believe. Yeah. So I have a little knowledge of, so anyway, you should do the research on the company Cyril. Oh, I'm not going to write it down. I was going to write it down, but I'm not going to write it. Searle, I think. And do the research on Cyril and the aspartame. I believe it was Cyril that came out with that. And do the research. And it turns out that they really didn't do a lot of studies on that product. And then later on, people started reporting all of these issues. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is it was like a political thing. So it got pushed through because of somebody in their political cronies. And they really didn't do the test on that. And there's a lot of tests on like rodents and even some of the humans that you might want to do. I would just say read it, and then it's up to you. Yes. Yep, yep, yep. Okay. Also, Miss Sonia. Oh, you're diabetic, and I only do sparkling water. I think that is the answer for you. Unfortunately, yeah, you have to drink water. Like diet soda is really not good for you either. And and I saw something today where they were talking about it does affect your insides, also, the digestive tract. It may have some effect on that. Do your research. But this is what I just saw this literally an hour ago, and I went, interesting. But look at how that thing went through the FDA's aspartame. It is crazy. It's not good. And I'm not saying that the FDA is the government. People have mixed feelings about that, but in some ways, see, it's funny. The FDA, in some ways, has done some good. Well, just like anything, I guess that's life. There, there's good. There's a positive side and the negative side. Well, one of the negative things with the Food and Drug Administration was how they pushed through, and they did push through aspartame, and do the googling on that, and it's kind of interesting. And I was shocked to find that out. I didn't know. You know. Okay. Now, let's see, Mr. Terry saying, please read the Holy Bible book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, KJV. Oh, a time and a season for everything under the sun. That's right. It's okay to have a selfish season in your life, a season all about you. Yeah. Yep. And then he says, Ecclesiastes moments are a time in the day when you meet your personal needs and personal wants. Not having Ecclesiastes moments will cause a decline in physical health and mental health. Nice. I learned about Ecclesiastes moment from a female rapper, life coach, and YouTuber named Love Dorsey. Nice. And the FDA, right, is the Food and Drug Administration. Yes. Yes. And then let's see, did I miss one? Yep. And Renee said yes, sparkling water helps. Yep. And oh, okay. Nice. Dre Davis is saying, I heard aspartame was originally made to be a pesticide. I'm not sure. But the thing that's a little bit concerning now, of course, if I'm remembering correctly, and you, like I said, just fact check me on this one, in your own time. But I remember it was large amounts were bad, but there's a documentary, and I just cannot remember which one because there's so many. I've seen all the food documentaries, Forks to Knives. Um, what's the other one? Super Size Me, Food Nation. There's a bunch of them, and the thing was, a lot of these people that were hooked, were really drinking. Oh, we're drinking a lot of diet soda. We're having all these issues, and oh, here's another one I actually saw. Uh, in front of me, somebody I know personally, and I worked with a guy who was hooked on diet Coke. Yeah, diet Coke, and he got kidney stones. And I forget the mechanism for how that happened. But when he asked his doctor, like, what happened? And the doctor said, oh, this thing makes calcium, pile up in your kidneys. And he said that. He said it's the diet soda. And he told me that. And I'll never forget that. And I went, ooh, note to self. Okay. And I said, well, how much were you drinking? And he would not tell me. He was so embarrassed. He said, girl, it was a lot. He said, so one time we were at a meeting, and inside the meeting room they had soda, and there was a guy who liked the diet Pepsi, and then there was a guy who liked the diet Coke, and I think the diet Coke guy, who was the guy who got the kidney stones, said, they only have diet Pepsi, I'm gonna go get some. And so we took a break, and he said, he goes, come with me, I'll show you. So we go to his car, and he had like 4 cases of diet Coke in his car. And every time, if he went to a restaurant or whatever, and they didn't have Diet Coke, or if they only had Diet Pepsi, he would bring his own. And that's how hooked he was. And he said, I was really drinking a lot. So, you know, and his name was Jim. And a shout out to Jim wherever you are. But he got kidney stones, and he had to get surgery to remove them. And I remember that. I will never forget that. Yes. So let's see. What did I miss here? Okay, a lot of things are genetic. My mom smoked for decades and drank and ate fried food and lived till 91. Yeah. Yeah, but I think, like, unfortunately, so the food is different, you know what I mean? Like, and it's funny how some people can smoke and do all that stuff, and they live forever. And I had an aunt who smoked, and she didn't make it to 55. And and it was interesting because she didn't smoke a lot. She kind of did it, here and there, here and there, here and there. Boom, massive tumor, lung cancer, dead. 6 months. Boom, 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 boom. And that's how it is. So you just never know. You know what I'm saying? And I see, oh, Miss Susan E's here. Hello. Good to see you. And Mr. Kyle's here. Thanks for coming in. Yeah. Oh, and Kyle likes Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi. I'm just saying, just eat those with caution. I mean, and don't overindulge. I'm just saying, but do your research on aspartame. And that's all I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Because like I said, my friend who loved the Diet Coke, he drank too much. I mean, I will say it's definitely quantity, but he did develop kidney stones, and he was only 35 at the time. He was 35 and fairly skinny. He didn't have any other health issues, but that was the only thing that he did that was a little bit high risk. And he drank too much. He was hooked on it for sure. Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. And Renee said I knew 30-year-old healthy Marines that dropped dead on the run. Yeah, and I believe that too. And and I think back to well, I still say that running's not good for you because you hit your joints. I mean, it's not the best. It's good to be. It keeps you skinny, but in terms of the pounding that happens to your knees and your joints and all that, and your feet, I don't think it's good. Especially like when you see people running on concrete and stuff, can't be good for you. I mean, it's. but it gives you exercise. But there's got to be better ways. And I know that people didn't run like that before. I mean, I guess they. I don't know. It's just all I'm saying is it's all very interesting. Like I think we're living in different times right now in terms of food. There's a lot of processed food. If you look at it, and you just have. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're eating a lot of like fast food because it's got a lot of preservatives and a lot of if you turn and read the labels, and then once again I'm always getting back to that. If you read the labels on the back of your product, whatever it is, and if it has more than two or three or four ingredients, then it's highly processed. And your body, when you're eating this stuff, goes, "Whoa, what the heck is this?" You know, and it's a chemistry lesson. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, you know what I mean? Something to think about. So that's the only thing. Like I said, I'm still back to this. You got to take care of yourself. I mean, unless you want to be sick later on. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, yeah. As a Marine, you need to run or you don't make it. I hate running. Yeah, it's brutal. Like I don't. I mean, I understand. Like I said, when in the military, you have to get fit really quickly. So I understand the wisdom of running, but I will tell you, child, you know hip replacements and knee replacements. Like I have a relative that was a runner, football player, baseball player, basketball player, both hips and both knees done. It's terrible. And that's not good. So clearly, I don't know. I don't think running is the best for you. But let's see here. You know what I mean? Let's see. Oops, I'm losing my screen here. Here we go. Yeah, so there we are. So I don't know. I'm just saying do the best that you can to take care of yourself. And, like I said, I've seen some positive things with removing sugar or limiting, you know what I mean? And that's kind of where we are. Yes. Yep. And yeah, Kyle's laughing. And GMO, yep. That's what Mr. Terry's saying. GMO, genetically modified organ. I think O is it organisms? I forget. That was sort of now I can't remember, but I think so. Yeah, that's what it is. So and like I said, your body, if you when you think about it, you can eat an apple. See, like I always say, if God didn't make it or the Most High, then it's not the best for you. You know what I'm saying? So like, they're doing this with the meat. Have you heard about that? They're doing weird stuff with the meat. I'm like, ugh, no, thank you. No, thank you. It's just too weird. Let me see here. I'm gonna go to this other tab here. But yeah, GMO. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is organism. Yeah, it is organism. And then what they say is, I'm gonna read the. This is the official definition. So any organism whose genetic material has been altered using genetic engineering techniques. Ew. And let's see. That's how they explain it. Yep. So there's a lot of stuff in there, and so the thing that I found is the biggest one is corn. And you know they did it. They claim that they changed corn to try to make it so that you could use less pesticides. But I'm not sure. Like I know, for example, like my mother's allergic to corn, and it's weird to find somebody who's allergic to corn. She's like one of the few, but I'm sure there's others. You know what I'm saying, that are out there. Yeah, it's just crazy. And oh boy, Su- Susan E saying I have to get my other knee replaced. Injections are not for me anymore. Yeah. So it's like weird, I mean, like you never heard about people getting hip replacements, kidney stones, because to me, kidney stones are definitely like you have too much calcium going on. What's the other weird kind of thing that's food related? Well, diabetes, like type 2 diabetes, that like I forget what the ratio is, but it's something like 1 in 3. It's almost close to 1 in 3 or something crazy. Like 30% of the population has type 2 when that was never the case. So like Renee's mother and her generation, all that smoking and eating and drinking and they live forever. But you see these young people and they're gone, so soon. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, so good luck with it with that. replacement. I know those are really tough. Those are really, really tough. Those surgeries. But yeah. Ugh. So anyway, so all I'm saying is once again, remember. So just think about what are you going to do to move yourself forward this week. Let's get back to that. So I'm thinking one little easy thing is limiting your sugar just a little bit. You can do a little bit. If you use two teaspoons of sugar in your coffee, you could do two. Break it down to one and kind of wean yourself down. Like you don't have to cold turkey do it cold turkey, but little things like that can make a difference. And eating as fresh as you can. So it's growing season now. It's here we got to the 60s the other day, which I was shocked in Pennsylvania. It never happens. This it's kind of early, but I was in Philadelphia yesterday, and people had on. I think it was even warmer down there. It was probably closer to 70. They were all wearing shorts and short sleeves, and and I was like, wow, that's crazy. But I just had on a hoodie, a little thin hoodie. But anyway, but the point is, you can start, you can start your seeds inside, and maybe some of this stuff you can actually start outside because I think the frost is done. Well, it's supposed to be May, but I don't know. It's pretty warm now, and I see all the birds. See, I always figure I watch the birds. If the birds are here in large numbers, then I kind of know that winter's done. That's how I sort of read it. But you know, anyway, it's time to start sort of growing what you can. And like I said, my plan right now is to keep going with the. I'm going to do some herbs and play around with those a little bit. But yeah. Oh, here we go. And this is good. Okay, so Susan E said I had my right knee, my had my right one done. I had a lot of pain with that surgery. Yeah, it's a very long process, to recovery, for recovery for those. Yeah, and do something physical if you can. It will help you more than anything. Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. I think you have to do both. You know what I mean? Like, and so, and that all kind of falls under taking care of yourself. You got to do it. Even if you're just walking more steps, just upstairs, up. I don't know if you have any stairs, but so a lot of people don't have stairs, but going upstairs, walking a little bit. They always say park a little bit further away from your store so you get a few more steps in. That's kind of a way that you can do that. Then that's a real easy fix. And it's not as pounding, and but you got to talk, as they say. I'm going to do the disclaimer. You got to talk to your doctor before you start any exercise program. But that, that's a real easy thing that you can do from home, and you don't have to go to the gym to do it. Yeah. And then, oh boy. And then, oh, see, that's tough, Susan. So Susan said, I'm allergic to different types of metals. So I have a ceramic knee on the right side. Girl, that's amazing. I have to look that up now. Now you got me interested. Yeah, I'm kind of into all this like weird science stuff sometimes. But anyway, so let's go back. So, what are you going to do this week to move yourself forward? Kind of make a couple of plans. Just remember, you are enough. You don't have to change for anybody. You know what I mean? Although, you want to be the best that you can be. So you want to be a reasonable and kind and understanding person. You know, and then do what brings you joy, because that does, bring up that dopamine in the brain, and it makes you feel good. And also helping other people, donating, volunteering, things like that. So, try to stay as positive as you can as possible. And like I said, I'm still back to let's take care of yourself. It's really important, and it's food, exercise, relationships. You got to stay in those positive relationships. And you have to cut off the ones that really try to drag you down or talk you down or whatever, because that all that stuff is related. It's all related. The mind and the body and all that. And so, it's that's how life is. But that's what I was thinking this week, just kind of saying, hey, take care of yourself and just think about all these things, and have a little fun whenever you can when you're doing those kind of things. And like I said, and when you're down, like I said, you're allowed to grieve. Give yourself a couple hours of grief. And I'm talking small setbacks, not major setbacks. But like small setbacks, you have to work through all that grief, and then you got to keep it moving. Yep. And then this, and hopefully this will help you too, staying as positive as you can. Like I said, you got to feel the feelings, but then you got to let it go. Yeah. All right now. So let's see. I'm going to check the chat one more time. And I want to say thank you all for coming in. This is cool. Okay. Oh, here we go. Oh, I like this too. Okay, let me go back. Oh, I missed one. Oh, here we go. So, Associate Minister Reserve Deacon Terry said, in addition to limiting sugar, also limit salt and fat. Now, here's the thing. I want to talk about. I'm going to hold on to that thought, Mr. Terry. I'm going to come back to. I'm going to read Renee's thing, and then I'll give you my little thoughts on the fat and salt. Okay, so Renee's saying, "Oh, I was watching a doctor talk about GLPs. They're researching something like that to suppress dopamine for drug addictions." Ooh, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's pretty good. And oh, good morning, Kelly, and everyone in the chat. That's DOY Creations. Hey, Jeanette. Okay, so I want to talk to you. I want to tell you about the fat. So back in the day, so when I was young, they were telling us not to eat fat, and they were saying fat makes you fat, and all this and that and the other. And so there's two things. I don't know if the other ladies in the chat can remember this, but remember when they were telling you eggs were bad? Remember that? And they were saying eggs have too much fat and cholesterol. And they said, don't eat fat. It's horrible for you. And so that's like one thing. And then they said, oh, yeah, fat makes you fat and this and that and the other. Well, I really think that they lied to us. I mean, well, I'm not saying they lied, but I'm not saying that that was the truth. I think that was a falsehood. And the thing is, what they found now is people who got rid of carbs or sugars are the ones that seem to do better, and the ones that got the meat, so those are meat and eggs and fat. Because see, the whole thing is your brain, all your organs have fat. So your brain, your ovaries, your testes, all the important organs have fat associated with them, especially the brain. Like you need fat in your diet. Now I don't know what the numbers are, and I still say that like that food pyramid is it was off. Like I think it was off for a very long time, and so you need it. So I don't know what to say, but I don't know if you've noticed, but like a lot of people are eating, more meat. They're doing kind of a carnivore kind of thing or keto, where they're eating less, eating less times a day, and then more meat and fatty or animal stuff or whatever. And the thing is, these people are all ripped. You know what I mean? They're getting. And I remember, when I was a little younger in school and stuff, these girls were eating a lot of carbs and to stop eating all the meat and stuff, and they just got fatter and fatter. And I'm starting to wonder if there's something, that part about not eating fat is bad. Like the salt part I get. I think anytime you have any, and I don't know what the number should be, but when you're having an excess of anything, that's always bad. You know what I mean? Like it's always a balance, right? You have to have a certain amount, and you need salt in your diet. You really do. But it's an electrolyte. Like you need those too. So I don't know. Like I said, I have a little distrust in the food industry because I still say you're better off just making your stuff yourself. Now you can't make the meat yourself or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? You can do a veggie burger yourself. You can do, you could make your own hamburger, and things like that. Cause I think you're better off if you do it yourself versus somebody else. But anyway, that's what I learned about fat. And I said, oh my gosh, every organ that you have has a little bit of fat associated with it that makes things roll. So yeah. So anyway, there's that. So I don't know. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Here's the example. Yeah, Renee, that's good. So they were certainly wrong about whole milk. Yes. So now here's what I heard. Now I don't know. You could do your research. But the thing with whole milk is they said that there was too much fat in there. But behind the scenes, and Renee can attest to this, since she was a dairy farmer in another life, um, I heard that they were skimming. Well, so anyway, so I think when the and you could correct me, When the milk comes out of the cow, there's the cream on the top, and then the whole milk, and then so when they try, and then at the very bottom is that skim, and they said that they were actually um, pouring that into the rivers because nobody wanted it back in the day, and we're talking like early 1900s. Nobody wanted the skim part. Like they wanted the cream, I get that, and they wanted the whole milk, I get that. But like they were throwing away the skim, whatever was left after that, they were tossing it. And then they said, "Oh no, we can't keep tossing this in the river. We have to try to figure out a way to sell this stuff." So I think that's how they kind of came to the skim milk part, which is very interesting. And like kids when they're growing, they need fat. They do, in my opinion. Yeah. So there's that. So just something to think about, and do your research. And but there's definitely something with that milk. Yeah. I mean, kids need it. When they're growing, they're growing. They need all the nutrients. You know what I'm saying? They need them all. And that's why I'm so passionate about food because like I said, I saw what fast food did to my husband. I saw what fast food did to oh gosh. I could see hit Morgan, what was his last name? The guy Morgan who did the Super Size Me. I saw what fast food did to his body, and that really pushed me over the edge. Like my husband definitely put on some poundage eating a lot of that, and the same thing with that Morgan Spurlock. Yeah, if you ever saw that documentary, check it out. If you haven't seen it, it's very interesting what McDonald's did to his body. He ate it 3 times a day for 30 days, and was followed by a doctor along the way, and then see what happens to his body. It's just very, very interesting. And the one thing I do remember is that he got hooked on the food because he never ate it. And that was the thing. He never really ate McDonald's, but then he got hooked. And I think he got hooked on the Coca-Cola. So it was like a double whammy for him. He liked the food and then the Coca-Cola. And he just got excited. He was like, "Oh, this Coke." And I remember him drinking it and he just kind of was like, mm. And I think for him it was the Coca-Cola. But anyway, yes. So, okay. So Renee's saying, right, when we made butter, we got rid of the rest, but not in the river. Yeah, they were saying that these dairies were dumping all of the skim milk into the rivers, and then I guess the rivers were getting polluted. And boy, that's a whole nother story. But like these corporations, they've done a lot of dumping, especially like in the water sources and stuff. And like I said, I grew up near Pittsburgh, so I saw some polluted areas, pretty bad. The air was polluted, the rivers were polluted. And because of the big companies were dumping unused or waste into the river. And so they did that with milk. And I forget what the effect was, but I just saw this recently. But they said it, they were dumping it because they didn't know what to do with the skim because nobody wanted it. But then they got everybody. So this is, oh, I forgot to say this. They got everybody kind of thinking, well, if you tell them they don't need fat, this is better for kids, blah, 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 blah. And then they started using it. And a lot of people, started drinking skim milk. And now the thing is, I did do a little research on the FDA website. And it's funny, nutritionally, all the milks are the same. They're really, really close. But it's just the calorie count and the fat amount that change between each of the ones. The grams of fat per cup or whatever. But I was shocked to find out that that they were nutritionally the same, except for the fat. Yeah. But do your research and check it out. Yeah. Okay. And Renee said, I'm 63 and have drank milk every day of my life. No brittle bones and good teeth. There you go. Yeah, you do have great teeth, by the way. You do. And then DOY Creation said, what can be healthy for one person can be harmful for another. Try to eat as clean as you can. Yeah, well, I think that's true. But what I'm saying, what I mean by healthy is like you said, eating as clean as you can and is unprocessed. Because like I said, I think the process, well, like I said, there's still a lot of processed foods out there. And the biggest, I think, offenders are like the sauces. And also, I think a lot of like the vegetarian stuff is I'm a little uncomfortable with a lot of that. Like like the fake burgers and the that fake meat. I forget what they call it, but it's very strange. Like to me, that's not a good, you know, that's not a good idea, to eat. Like I said, processed. Like to me, if you're eating a fake burger, then you should probably just eat the burger. But even though I know that's not easy, for someone to go, vegetarian, go back, but I think you're better off just eating the meat. At least it's meat, as long as it's meat. But like I said, I've seen those like near whatever, I don't know what they call that stuff. But every time they try to make something that's normally like, you could find it in nature, then it's a little bit off. I don't know. And that's just my little opinion there. Yes. Oh, that's true. And that's true. And Renee said, yeah, one of our issues is that clean eating is expensive. That is true. And I would say if you can, well, I'll give you my thing. So I've been sort of, because I've been so hyper focused on food. I'm trying not to like make myself crazy, and I don't want to make everybody else crazy. But I just think so far the thing that I've noticed is the Aldis and the Lidls in terms of produce are a little less expensive. Walmart I think is a little bit less expensive than the supermarkets. Um, the farmers markets, you have to I like farmers markets as long as you're getting food that's sort of local. And a lot of times like farmers markets aren't necessarily farmers markets. In other words, they a lot of times they get food shipped in like from Argentina, just like everybody else. Like when you get those strawberries, they're from Argentina, I think, and some of them are from California, but some of them are from overseas. So the thing that's the issue is a lot of this food it's been trucked so far, and then it loses nutrients the minute that you pick it, unless you eat like a frozen berry or a frozen like carrot or something like that. Because usually they flat or even like frozen fish, like they flash freeze the food right as it's picked or whatever. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, if you have to, but a lot of times farmers markets, they just get the food from the supermarket distributors as other people do. So you have to sort of look for that. But I think anything that they grow that's local or close to you is the best that you can do. But it's hard, you know what I mean? But I think Aldi sort of helps a little bit with that, because I always thought their produce was reasonable, and I'm not sponsored, but I'll just, just been my experience. And we've had some pretty good fish from them. And I always buy the frozen. I try to buy the fresh when I can if it's reasonable and fresh. But a lot of times the frozen is wild caught, and pretty good. I don't know. I've had pretty good luck that way. Yeah. But it can be expensive. And but I also think that the other thing, this is the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll kind of end it here. But I had a client years ago that was from, where was he? He was from Egypt. That's right. He was from Egypt. And he immigrated to the United States, and he's been here, forever. But the thing that's funny is, and he said, "You Americans eat too much." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You don't need 3 meals a day." And you know what? I think he's right. See, at the time, I kind of, I wasn't really thinking about this stuff. And so the one example is, I'm finding that a lot of people that have had weight issues, and Drizzle Stank or Drew, was telling me that, like, so anyway, Drew lost, for the people that don't know, Drew lost 100 pounds. It took him 3 years, and he did what he called a modified keto diet, where um he cut all the carbs. Like he cut the carbs as low as he could go, like almost zero. Like he said he eats about 2 grams, which is not much of carbs. I think it's 2 grams a day, 2 grams a day, which is really low. And like he's ripped. And if you saw the if he's I don't know if he has any pictures on his page, but like he was really, really big. Okay. And now he's like ripped. He's got the chiseled stomach and everything. And it's amazing. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," because that's how I met him. We were just talking about I was in a live stream and I met him, and we were just randomly talking about food. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I lost, 100 pounds." I'm like, "Say what now?" And then I had to ask him. And then I sort of interviewed him behind the scenes. I was like, "So what did you do?" But I think, and like I said, he's eaten more meat, than he ever was. He's eaten no carbs. And once he because he was big. Like I said, 100 pounds is a lot. Um, once he was able to, like, when all the stress on his body like eliminated itself, then he could work out more. But I said, man, I to me that sounds like the answer, in my opinion. Not a doctor, but I'll tell you, I think he did it. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. So anyway, but he said that he would only eat. I don't know if he eats 2 meals a day. I think he kind of goes between 1 and 2 meals a day, and I think that's the ticket. In addition to the how he's cutting the carbs and all the other stuff. Yeah. Let's see. So yeah, one of our issues. Yes, that's right. And then Renee said, yes, we have a grazing culture, right? So anyway, so like I said, my client was like, he thought we were eating too much. He said that. He said, you guys eat too much. You eat too often. He goes, and he gave the example. He was a doctor, and he said, yeah. So my kid goes to school at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then they feed them breakfast, and then he goes, and then at 11:45 they eat lunch, which is like another meal, and then at 3 p.m. they get a snack, and I was like, oh my gosh, and then they come home at like 4 o'clock or 3:30, and then they get another snack, and then we have dinner at like 6 o'clock. And I went, oh my gosh, that is a lot of food if you kind of break it down like that. Because you can't possibly be hungry, at all those meals, in my opinion. I don't know. Just something to think about. Yeah. So, but I just remember, he just kind of said, you guys eat too much. And I said, okay. And I said, okay, you win. I think I understand. Yeah. And I grew up eating that way. I mean, well, for me, I had the, I guess the hormone in my brain that would say, you're hungry now. You're hungry. Like I never was a big snacker in between meals. And I was fairly active, especially as a younger person. But, and I never had a weight problem. But of course, the minute you start working, like, and you're behind a desk, X number of hours a day, then that's when the weight like comes on. It's crazy. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, I'm just thinking of Drew or Drizzle. I think that's the answer. And if because like the funny thing was when I met him, he goes, look at my stomach. And I'm like, oh, snap. That's pretty good. Like I've never had a chiseled stomach. Even when I was at the height of my fitness, I never had a chiseled stomach. So I think that's really funny. But that's cool. I was like, good for you. All right now. So just some things to think about. That's all I say. And and I think like a real easy fix is the sugar, you know, and yeah, and the soda, which is sugars again. Yep. So there we go. So let's get our week. Like I said, we'll stay positive. Let's do the best that we can for ourselves and support each other. That's a good thing. So I just want to say, hey, I bring it every day. We are an open channel, and I appreciate other people's opinions. I don't mind other people's opinions. And I just say, hey, do your research on this. And remember, like I said, if it's easy, there's always a cost to all the decisions that you make in life. And that I'll just put it that way. And you just want to make sure that you do the best for yourself and your family. And I know, like I said, prices are really high right now. I went to the supermarket, it's always sticker shock. And how to get around all this stuff is, like I said, I think you get that freezer going. You know what I mean? You grow your own. You get a good deal, and try to freeze a lot of that stuff that you can. And hopefully, you can sort of parcel out a lot of that food. But and then maybe share. Like I said, I think a lot of people. I really wish I had somebody close by that I could share with, And like I said, when I go to these farmers markets, they have these 9 pound and 20, I'm sorry, 20 pound and 30 pound bags of potatoes. I can't really, for me, it's going to go to waste. But I'm just saying, like, that's just an example of one, where it's just, you know, it'd be good if we could share, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know. Things to think about. Yeah, carbs. Yep, carbs convert to sugar, and they say even like a baked potato is really not that bad, you know. But the minute that you make a French fry out of it, that's when it's over. But I just wish we could share some of this stuff, and even like a lot of times, they'll have bags of green beans. It might be 2, 3, 4 pounds of things like that. But I just wish I wish I could sort of share some of this stuff with other people or split it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Splitting it. Yeah. So those are some ideas that you can use. Yeah. Trading. Here we go. Yes. We used to trade with other farmers, beef for pork, etc. Yep. That is the ticket because things are expensive. Oh, and the other thing was one of the farmers was telling me that he and his family would split a steer. I don't know how much meat that is. It's a lot. And maybe Renee can tell us. Yeah, it was like pounds of meat, and they would literally just buy meat once, which I thought was actually really good. Not having to worry about going to the store for that stuff. And I said, that's the ticket. That may be the ticket too. So I don't know if there's a way that you can go to a butcher, and split half a steer or a quarter steer. I don't know. Things like that. And also, maybe pooling some resources because I feel like we're all going to have to start doing that for sure because things are high. Yeah. If we had a giant freezer and one cow would last us a year. See, Renee. See that? Renee's our farmer. Thanks, Renee. Yeah, that's awesome. See, that's what I'm talking about. And then that way you kind of remove the risk of the inflationary prices because I think that's going to be the other key. I don't know how we're going to do it, but that's one way to do it if you can. Yeah, I like it. Yep. And I said, because like I said, I'm new. I mean, I've been here 10 years, but like I feel new. No, wait, we've been here more than that. But anyway, we've been here a while, but I still feel like I'm sort of new to the rural way of living. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm learning so much, and also me moving out to the country really changed, my vision of food and just seeing what's available and things like that. So yeah, there we go. I like it. All right. Well, listen, thank you all so much for coming in, and like I said, let's all get it going this week. Do some good things and make something pretty while you're working behind the scenes and have fun. Yes. All right. Well, peace and love, and we'll see you soon. But thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to thank Drizzle, wherever he is, for the theme song. All right. Peace. Peace and love. Bye bye.